You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Hi, I'm Maria Varmazes, and I'm the host of T-, the only daily podcast for the space industry. Every weekday, I'll be covering the latest news in space technology, business, and governance by talking with the people who are forging the path in this new space era. If you're a space professional looking to separate the signal from the noise and stay current on what's happening, this show is for you. Join me every day for T-, the daily space industry podcast. Listen on all major podcast platforms or visit space.n2k.com. That's space.n2k.com.
Our sponsor, Collide, has some big news. If you're an Okta user, they can get your entire fleet up to 100% compliance. How? If a device isn't compliant, the user can't log into your cloud apps until they fix the problem. It's that simple. Without Collide, IT struggles to solve basic problems, like ensuring everyone's OS and browser are up to date. Unsecure devices log into your company's apps with no problems because there's nothing there to stop them. But Collide works seamlessly with Okta to enforce compliance as part of authentication and complete the zero-trust security puzzle. Visit collide.com/CyberWire Daily to learn more or book a demo. That's KOLIDE.com/CyberWire Daily. BellaCiao is malware from Iran's IRGC, while PingPull is malware used by the Chinese government-affiliated Taurus group. Ransomware continues to be a pervasive international threat. An overview of hacktivism. Our guest is Cybermind's founder Peter Coronius, discussing the importance of mental health in cybersecurity. Johannes Ulrich shares insights from his RSAC panel discussions. And Ukraine continues to collect evidence of Russian war crimes. From the RSA conference in San Francisco, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, April 26, 2023. Iran's APT Charming Kitten, sponsored by Tehran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has been seen using a new strain of malware known as BellaCiao, Bitdefender reported this morning. The group, known also by many names including Mint Sandstorm, Phosphorus, APT-35, and APT-42, uses this individually tailored dropper to deliver payloads from their command and control server. Bitdefender said that each sample collected was tied up to a specific victim and included hard-coded information such as company name, specially crafted subdomains, or associated public IP address. The malware has been seen in use against victims in the US and Europe, but also against targets in Turkey and India. The exact point of infection is unknown, but researchers conjecture a Microsoft Exchange exploit chain software vulnerability or something similar. The researchers suspect the Italian moniker for this Iranian native malware, BellaCiao, may be a reference to a folk song of the same name about resistance fighters. Researchers at Palo Alto's Unit 42 discovered a new malware strain they're calling PingPull. It's used by Taurus, a cyberespionage group attributed to China. PingPull targets Linux machines and has been used in conjunction with the SWORD 2033 backdoor. Unit 42 explained that although Taurus has been historically active against telecommunications companies in Asia, Europe, and Africa, recently researchers have noticed increased activity spreading to financial institutions and government entities. BitSite reported today that they discovered a new high-severity exploit for the Service Location Protocol, stating SLP is a protocol that was created in 1997 through RFC 2165 to provide a dynamic configuration mechanism for applications in local area networks. The exploit, dubbed CVE 2023-29552, allows attackers to launch DDoS attacks against OpenSLP instances. CISA explains, the service location protocol allows an unauthenticated remote attacker to register arbitrary services. This could allow an attacker to use spoofed UDP traffic to conduct a denial of service attack with a significant amplification factor. BitSite explained, attackers exploiting this vulnerability could leverage vulnerable instances to launch massive denial of service amplification attacks with a factor as high as 2,200 times, potentially making it one of the largest amplification attacks ever reported. BitSite urges businesses to disable SLP on devices connected to the open internet, and if that's not possible, then firewalls should be configured to filter traffic on UDP and TCP port 427. This will prevent external attackers from accessing the SLP service. The Five Eyes Alliance is seeing a rising threat from ransomware, Infosecurity magazine reports. Felicity Oswald, the United Kingdom's National Cybersecurity Center's COO, noted at the RSA conference that ransomware continues to be pervasive in the UK, as very little skill is required to implement the malware. Rita Erfurt, Threat Intelligence Senior Executive at the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, said, ransomware is the most destructive form of cybercrime facing Australia. CDO Trends reports that a study from Rubrik on data security says that 72% of organizations have actually paid hackers using ransomware, yet only 16% saw success in data retrieval using attacker-supplied tools. National representatives in attendance from the UK, Australia, the US, and Canada noted that their national cybersecurity strategies are currently in the works or have recently been published. Infosecurity magazine notes that Canada and Australia's cyber strategies are still in development and under review. The UK saw the release of its national strategy in December of last year, and the US finalized theirs last month. Radware issued a report this morning offering an overview of the current state of hacktivism. Much of the genuine politically motivated actions have pursued familiar targets. Israel, for example, comes in at number 1 among the countries targeted, but the emergence of hacktivist organizations serving as cyber auxiliaries to governments, especially the Russian government, is a noteworthy development. The Russian hacktivist organizations include Killnet, No Name 05716, which wants everyone to understand that they're not working for Killnet, and the Passion Group, which began its career as a Killnet affiliate, but which has recently shown signs of morphing into a profit-driven criminal gang with an advocacy side hustle. Radware's conclusion sums up the record the Russian hacktivists have compiled, stating, pro-Russian hacktivists have been actively attacking anyone who supports Ukraine or goes against Russia for over a year now. Killnet has been dedicated to its cause and has had the time to build experience and increase its circle of influence across affiliate pro-Russian hacktivist groups. We've seen groups like No Name 05716 successfully exploring crowdsourced botnets, with financial incentives, and Passion Group providing DDoS as a service attacks to like-minded groups. While No Name 05716 is the major force to be reckoned with in terms of DDoS attacks, Killnet's influence, reach, and tactics are growing and changing, and they're not showing signs of slowing down or retiring soon. Killnet, by the way, has been promising a big announcement this evening at 10 p.m. Moscow time. We'll be keeping our eyes out for it. And finally, Ukraine is collecting evidence of alleged Russian war crimes with a view toward both prosecuting those responsible, should they become available for prosecution, or at least toward ensuring the preservation of the historical record and assuring that the history is told accurately. In this effort, they're receiving international assistance, some of it from the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation. These investigations are groundbreaking in that so much of the relevant evidence is digital, CyberScoop reports. Digital forensics will be important not only for investigating cyber attacks against civilian infrastructure, but also for geolocation of perpetrators in the vicinity of their crimes. Devices can put their owners at the scene, and that holds for war crime investigations as well as for ordinary criminal cases. We would add 2 other potential spheres of investigation: collection of communications authorizing and organizing atrocities, and collection of communications that could amount to incitement. There's been no shortage of incitement to genocide. Coming up after the break, our guest is CyberMind's founder Peter Coronius, discussing the importance of mental health in cybersecurity. Johannes Ulrich from the SANS Technology Institute shares insights from his RSAC panel discussions. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. Never refactor your apps again. Never get locked into an IDP. Say goodbye to your old on-prem systems and identity-managed complexity. Now you can solve your biggest IAM problems with identity orchestration, even the messy ones you thought were unsolvable. Bring Strata any IAM use case, like modernizing legacy apps to use passwordless authentication, migrating from one IDP to another, or enabling identity operation resiliency. Strata's identity orchestration platform is designed to extend the value of your identity infrastructure, no matter the complexity or scale. What's more, Strata's software is lightweight and flexible, developer-friendly, and vendor-agnostic. Want to see it in action? Share your identity challenge with Strata on a discovery call, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. Peter Coronius is the founder of CyberMinds, which has gotten a start in Australia, addressing the importance of mental health in cybersecurity. He stopped by to visit with us here at the RSA conference to celebrate their launch here in the U.S.
We launched CyberMinds in the US yesterday morning, first thing really, and it was really our extension of the CyberMinds program into the US for the first time. So very excited. We had some great representation. The director, Jen Easterly, was kind enough to give us some words of support. She wasn't able to attend in person, but she sent a beautiful video. And I think what we're realizing and what we're seeing is that the problems that we encountered in Australia in the last few years, I think, are fairly universal around burnout in cyber teams. It was really great to just see the warm reception we got and the recognition for the issues that we're attempting to address here.
Well, let's clarify that. What is the mission of CyberMinds?
Well, it's pretty simple, really. I mean, I've got a long background in cybersecurity, but I've also had a very long background and exposure to neuroscience and personal development. And in a way, I was keeping them separate. I was using the personal development strategies in my own career when I was heading the Internet Industry Association in Australia. It was sort of my secret weapon. It was how I kept on game and could switch off when I needed to. But I guess during the pandemic, I was starting to see more and more burnout in teams, cyber teams, and amongst my peers. And finally, one day the penny dropped, and I thought, look, here's the opportunity to integrate these two passions of the personal development, relaxation, optimization of the mind, and bringing it into cybersecurity for the first time. And that's really the mission now, is to go in with tangible on-the-ground support now, more than just talking about it, going in and actually delivering a very powerful protocol, which we can talk about, but it's had extensive use in the military in the US and in Australia. So we know it works. There's plenty of science that supports its effectiveness. And I think our contribution as CyberMinds is to just work with organizations and to start bringing teams back from burnout and back into the sort of zone where we want them to be.
What is your sense in terms of the problem itself, the problem of burnout within cybersecurity? To what degree is it the nature of the job? Is it the nature of the people who are attracted to that kind of job, or a spectrum in between?
I think it's a combination of factors. One thing I will say is that we've done a fairly deep analysis now of the drivers of burnout in cyber. And there really is, in my mind, something particular and unique about working in cybersecurity that means that it stands apart from other professions, and not to take away from the stresses that they encounter, and many people have encountered during COVID particularly. But with cybersecurity, we've identified at least 15 factors that all in combination come to bear on teams and are driving this burnout. And we really think that there isn't very much to compare outside of cybersecurity. So, I think we're familiar with what some of those factors will be. It's the relentless nature of the attack environment. It's the invisibility of success, so you don't really know when you're winning. And
right, we did all these things, congratulations, nothing happened.
Yeah. And that's very hard, and so that plays into a lack of recognition for the value of the work that our cyber peers are doing. In addition, on top of that, you've got the high visibility of failure, and particularly, I would say, the downstream consequential effects of a single failure, potentially affecting, as we've seen in Australia and elsewhere, tens of millions of people. And so, that plus another 12 or so factors start to create a very unique environment that, quite frankly, our brains are not optimized for. And the result of that is we start to see cyber professionals questioning their own effectiveness in the job. They start to doubt their own efficacy. And that of one of the three metrics that predict resignation intent as burnout metrics, that's the one that is actually in our research outpolling that even of frontline healthcare workers. So just to sort of condense that point, what our research is showing is that on that one metric that predicts the intention to resign, cyber people are polling worse than even the frontline healthcare workers. And that should be a concern for all of us for obvious reasons.
Let's talk about the framework itself then. How are you all approaching this problem?
So I mentioned the IREST protocol. It stands for Integrative Restoration. It was developed in California, actually, by Dr. Richard Miller, and he's founded the IREST Institute. So he's really the true mental health pioneer in this space. He's a clinical psychologist. And they had taken the protocol into the US military in 2004, actually. And they were using it to help treat PTSD in returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. And they found pretty quickly that they were getting quite remarkable results. Also, it was being used very effectively to address anxiety, depression, insomnia, a lot of even pain management, but a lot of the things that we see manifesting within cyber teams now, and particularly, I would say, the most critically affected units would be around the SOC analysts.
Right.
And this constancy of, the incoming, and they're having to sort through false positives, and that sort of kicks the brain into a hypervigilant state, which over time I think is really not sustainable. So the protocol has had this extensive application in the military, and it was officially endorsed actually by the Army Surgeon General in 2010 as a Tier 1 complementary therapy. So I looked at this and I thought, there are a lot of similarities between military and cybersecurity in terms of the defensive posture that you have to take and really the toll that it takes on the individuals. And so I approached the IRIS Institute. I'd done the training myself as a facilitator, and I started piloting it. I was seeing great results in Australia, and I thought, well, the general population, because these measures we use have got general population norms that are already established, but then we can go in and look at how you're comparing with other professional groups, as I said, the frontline healthcare workers or teachers or other professions. But more importantly, we can also start to build a picture of where your organisation sits in relation to other organisations within cybersecurity. And what we hear from the people that we're running our programs is that they start to make better decisions because they're not now coming out of their flight and fight limbic system in the brain, but they're actually more able to come back into a present-centred state where they're accessing where they need to access the prefrontal cortex and where all the the good decision-making occurs, and we're moving them back into that zone. And also, we give them the ability to switch off. When they go home, the protocol can be used before sleep, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, which I'm sure many people can relate to.
Sure, yeah.
The mind is racing, and it's because you've carried a lot of subconscious stuff into sleep, and it wants to break through and be heard. And as that happens, you actually start to get development in other parts of the brain that are involved with emotional regulation, seeing things in perspective. Even empathy starts to build, and you become, the team morale improves because everyone's feeling a little bit more restored emotionally. So yeah, it's very powerful, very interesting how it works.
That's Peter Coronius from Cyberminds. And it is always my pleasure to welcome back to the show Johannes Ulrich. He is the Dean of Research at the SANS Technology Institute, and he is also the host of the ISC Stormcast podcast. Johannes, great to see you.
Great to see you actually in person. I'm standing across from you here. It's all different.
It's so decadent, isn't it? It's one of the great things about this conference is you get to see so many people face to face who you only get to see remotely along the way. Well, speaking of the conference, you are presenting here this year, or actually you did present here this year. Tell us about your program.
Yeah, so I'm part of the SANS panel again. I think we're doing this now for 10 plus years. We were talking about this earlier, kind of hard to remember when it all started.
Right.
But the idea is always that we talk about emerging threats, basically things that are already kind of an issue, but are probably going to be of more concern in the next year or so. So that's really sort of the theme of this, and we narrowed it down to the top 5 of these threats.
Okay. Can we go through some of them together?
Yeah. So we have on the panel Heather Mahalik, we have Katie, and we have Stephen Sims, and Ed Scotus is sort of managing it all. And Katie talked about, for example, these search engine optimizations that's more and more happening now, in particular with Google, where essentially attackers are just buying ads for their malware, which is an amazing kind of concept that it works. But it does work, and they're able to really sort of trick people into basically downloading malware instead of the legitimate software they looked for.
So this is a situation where, let's say I was looking for the latest copy of Zoom or something like that, and I do a search in Google, and the first ad that would pop up would pretend to be from Zoom, but would actually have malware embedded in it?
Correct, and it's going to a page that looks like Zoom, so it's really hard for anybody really to figure out what they're downloading. So that's a challenge here, and of course, Google hasn't really been super responsive to all of this.
That's a troubling aspect of this, that Google hasn't been speedier on getting on top of this.
I have like this virus total thing there here that may help.
Let's continue down the list. What are some of the other things you guys are looking at?
And then, of course, ChatGPT is a big thing.
Right.
Stephen Sims and Heather will sort of talk a little bit about this. Stephen, a little bit about the technical aspects, and how do you basically socially engineer ChatGPT into writing malware for you, and what some of the tricks are that people have figured out in how to sort of convince ChatGPT to do that. They put some controls in here. If you just outright ask it to write malware. It usually doesn't work. But then you can, like, for example, ask it, hey, let's pretend you're writing a movie script. How would you in that movie?
Right.
So fairly simple things. Now, Heather is going more into sort of the personal aspect of this. And she has some fairly troubling, at least to me, kind of conversation with ChatGPT and her son, where she used ChatGPT to write texts to send to her son that are supposed to pretend that she's a teenage girl. And so...
interesting.
And actually, I think she said her son mentioned one of those texts was like one of the best he ever received from her, with all the emojis and such.
Interesting.
So ChatGPT really got off the tone pretty right here of
Interesting.
Of this, yeah.
Well, I mean, but perhaps there's an upside where we can have cross-generational, communications, have it serve as a translation layer between us and our kids.
Right, exactly. Now learn how to talk with your kid.
Hey, whatever it takes, right? As the parent of a teenage boy, I welcome anything that helps us see eye to eye. What else are you guys looking at?
And then I'll be talking about attacks against developers. This is something that we have seen more and more of, and lately, like for example, this LastPass issue where a home system of a developer was compromised, essentially led to the compromise of the entire organization, more or less. We also had this again with 3CX, where that trading software that was downloaded was then used to compromise the organization. So where developers are really sort of taking a lot of the brunt kind of these attacks because they are the supply chain. So when we talk about supply chain attacks and we talk about malicious libraries, well, how did that library become malicious? A developer sort of was involved at one point, whether that developer willingly collaborated or whether someone made the developer collaborate by installing malware on their system. That's really sort of the big problem here.
Yeah. So RSA Conference does a great job of putting these panels online for folks to view afterwards. Will this be included in that? Are you being videotaped or recorded?
Yeah, definitely being recorded.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether it will be online like for free or whether it will be online for people who actually paid and attended a conference. Usually, at least like after a few months or so, they make it like freely available online.
Yeah. Any other things from the conference that have drawn your attention here before we wrap up?
Well, it's big as ever before. Like last year, I think was a little bit, felt like a trial run kind of.
Right.
But now it's sort of back to normal and it's big. Lots of vendors, lots of noise also on the floor. That's what I noticed. It felt quieter last time.
I think that's right. So back to normal for better, for worse, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Johannes Eldrich, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Halcyon. Ransomware is still one of the largest threats facing businesses in 2023. The Halcyon platform was built to stop it through a multi-layered protection approach featuring full encryption key capture, automated decryption, and the ability to prevent other security tools on the endpoint from being unhooked. Learn more about how they're leveraging capsule network-based machine learning to reduce ransomware recovery times down to minutes by visiting halcyon.ai. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can write us an email at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by John Petrick. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security. Because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. On a final note, our friends at N2K just launched T-, the only daily space podcast. Here's what you can expect from the show. Stay tuned for T-, ready to launch.
We are in a new space era. Advances in engineering and manufacturing have given us access to the heavens in ways that seemed almost unthinkable not that long ago. Private and public sector cooperation in the space industry is leading to innovation that sometimes feels like it's right out of a page of science fiction. But these achievements in space are real, and they're bringing incredible advances in defense, communications, infrastructure, engineering, and science to all of us right here on Earth. And they're happening fast. Join me. I'm Maria Varmazes, and I'm the host of T-, the daily space podcast for the space industry. Every day, you'll get the news and analysis you need to stay current on what's happening in space technology, business, and governance. To do that, I'll be talking with the people who are forging the path in this new space era, from industry leaders, technology experts and pioneers, to educators, policymakers, research organizations, and more. If you're a space professional looking to separate the signal from the noise and stay current on what's happening, this show is for you. Join me every day for T-, the daily space industry podcast. T-. Available on all major podcast platforms.